I'm John from Nicothin Gaming, and today I want to walk you through how to use Firebase Realtime Database with Unity. So in this, we are going to connect our Firebase to our Unity project. I'll walk you through all of those steps. As you see, I've got a completely empty project, just my sample scene, and I'm going to create a new Firebase with you. To use Firebase, you of course need to have a Google email, which is simple enough to get outside of the scope of this video. So, just get a Google email. Go to firebase.google.com. The link will be in the description of this video. And I will walk you through the whole process. Okay, so here is my Firebase console. I will click Add Project, and you need to name the project. This does not have to be the name that you use in Unity, and you can create multiple Firebases for one project. They just need different names. Now, for this project name, I am just going to go out and call it the Real-Time Database Demo. Okay, looks like I can only have numbers, spaces, and characters, but see, that's the great thing about Firebase. If you do anything that it does not like, it will tell you right away in great detail. I'm going to click Continue. You can have Google Analytics if you like, but I'm just fine turning them off. So I will click Create Project. It's going to take just a moment for it to actually create your project. So let's come back when that's done, and maybe pause the video and come back when yours is done as well. But as you see, I'm over halfway done, over 3/4 by the time I'm done talking. So we'll be back soon. Alright, that wasn't long at all. So now it says your new project is ready. Let's click Continue. It loads into our new project. You see the overview. And right at the top, get started by adding Firebase to your app. So let's click on Unity, and you can either register as an Apple app or register as an Android app. Both ways uses the same ID that you would use, but of course I do not have Macintosh devices, so I won't be doing that, but just know it's the same way as com.company.app name. Now, to get this information, we need to go back to our Unity. So here we are. In my Unity, I will click Edit, Project Settings, and as a note, this does not have to be an Android application or an iOS application for the Macintosh Apple devices. So as you see, I'm still on my Windows build instead of the Android or iOS, and it still will work perfectly fine. At least it has with me. If it doesn't with you, please let me know in the comments, and I would love to troubleshoot with you. So let's go to, first, let's set our company name and our product name. This is the name for our project. So the company name, for me, I like to say Nicothin Gaming, which is the brand that I am promoting. If you do not have a company registered with the government, that's perfectly fine. No one actually checks. That's only for your tax information when you start to make real money, like $100,000 or more, based on your country. Product name, I'll keep it as my project. That's fine. But okay, now let's go here just to make it easy. If you have the override default bundle identifier turned on, I like to turn it off, and then we can just copy this. But if we look, it says that we have some invalid characters, which is the space. So usually things do not like to have spaces, so I'm just going to close that and get there. if you want to keep your project like this with spaces in it, then just override it and backspace out of that. So that's, a quick fix for you. But I don't mind enough, so I will copy this by going to the bundle identifier that is grayed out right now. I will right click and copy just so I don't have to type all of this by hand. And that is exactly what we will type into Firebase. So let's go back to Firebase now. Alright, and where it says the Android package name, I will paste it there. You can add a nickname for your app if you want, but this is, as it says, optional and only if you're adding many, so you can add many projects to one Firebase instance, one Firebase project. But okay, I will click Register App. It's just going to take a second, and as we see, the next thing we want to download the configuration file. Now this is something that we must do, and it will be unique for each and every project that you add. So I will click Download Google Services JSON. We'll see the pop-up. It just takes a moment. We can click Next. Then you want to download the Firebase Unity SDK zip folder. I have already done this, and after you've done it once, you don't need to do it multiple times. And if there is an update, Firebase does notify you. So I say download this and click Next, and then we are all set. The next thing we do want to do is it's good to have an authentication for your app. I have other videos about doing things like Google OAuth authentication, but for this, we are just trying to focus on the database, so I'm just going to do an anonymous authentication. Email and password is very simple as well, but you do need to spend a lot of time in Unity developing that whole setup. And now that we have our anonymous authentication enabled, that we see from authentication sign-in method enabled, we will now go to build, and we can either choose Firestore database or real-time database. There is an amazing quiz that Firebase offers that you can fill out for your database needs. So here's that little quiz that I was talking about. It says role of the database. My app uses a database for, and then is it for synchronizing data or for advanced querying? If you don't know, just kind of give your best answer. Do you want synchronous data that stays the same, or for just with basic queries? Or do you want some advanced queries? Queries are how you retrieve data from the database. Let me see what I can do to reduce the construction noise. We'll be right back before you even know it. Alright, so hopefully the noise is reduced a bit for you. Okay, so yeah, with me, I usually do very simple data synchronization and querying and things like that. I don't want to do advanced things or sorting or transactions. That's easy enough to do. And then, you just go through. I just need a few gigabytes, a simple JSON tree. My app will need to perform devices with limited or no connectivity. Then, yeah, maybe I do that a lot. And just a single database. And then it goes through and, you kind of pick, okay, so I've got 3 real times, 4 real times, and only 3 cloud firestores. So I am going to pretty much be safe with doing the real-time database, which is simpler and cheaper than Firestore. Okay, so that kind of tells me what I want. So I'm going to go with the real-time database, and these are both very well supported. I'm just going to get you through to doing some basic data adding and subtracting. and hopefully my video helps you understand their documentation, which can be a bit more advanced, and it lacks Unity examples so far. Anyways, let's click Create Database. It's going to take a moment, and it's going to ask me which region do I want my database in. And we have a few regions. This is definitely bound to change, but I'm just going to go with the default United States, US Central 1. I'll click Next, and I can either, now these are talking about the security rules for our real-time database. If I have not already made a rule-specific video, I will make one later, but I believe I have, because the rules in Firebase are very important. Now we can either start in test mode or start in locked mode. I'm just going to start in locked mode and do something that Firebase doesn't really like. Which you'll see momentarily. Okay, so here's our database. This is the link to our database. We may need to use that later. So there are sometimes when you get the instance when you need to say get instance of this link, but other times you're safe simply getting the raw instance. And I'm going to change this to true, which means when can you look at the data in the database? You can always look at the data in the database. Anyone can look at the data in my database. You can do other things like auth doesn't equal null, I believe. And it does give you, great things like this. You can click the Learn More to see some more examples of it. It can be a bit dry and hard to dig through these, but I definitely do recommend going through and testing these. Even some basic use cases. There we go. Doesn't equal. So I might want doesn't equal. But either way, I am just going to go to true because this video is not about rules. So just remember, read is for looking at the data. What data can you go through and, oh yes, read. Writing is adding data, deleting data, and updating data. So if you come from an SQL background, you should know about CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. Read is for read. Write is for create, update, delete. And that's all you need. Then we do need to click publish, and it takes a moment. Now, if you do have insecure security rules like me, then you will receive an email every single day from Firebase, not so politely reminding you, hey, anyone can access your database. But for some projects, that's really not necessary. Okay. Now we'll go into data, and you see that I have no data here. And to do this, let's go back to our Unity app and start to connect to this database. Alright, we're back in Unity. I'm going to close my project settings. We don't need those for now. I'll right-click in my assets because I like to be organized. I will create a folder which I will name scripts. I will go into my scripts, and I'm going to create a C# script, which I will call Firebase Controller. You can name this anything you want. The name of this does not matter. One last thing, I'm going to right-click, create an empty, which I will call my Firebase Controller. And then I'm just going to wait for it to reload the script assemblies. Then I'll drag and drop my Firebase Controller script onto my Firebase Controller game object. There we go. Okay. And I will double click this to open it. And it will take a moment. I like to use Microsoft Visual Studios 2002. It comes with some great plugins that will automatically complete your code, and it can connect very well with Firebase itself. Okay, some old scripts from when I was doing other things in this project. There we go. So my Firebase controller. Now I will just go ahead and delete my start and update, and we will get right into doing this. Now, to let you know, the first thing we want to do is we want to authenticate, then we want to load our database, do whatever we want with the database. You can read right away, you can update it, but I will go through all of that with you. I do not need the Unity Code Assist, which is a plugin that I have on my Visual Studios, so let's go right into it. Alright, so to get started with this, we want to create a few variables for ourselves. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get my Firebase off, and if I press Control period, okay, so because I am seeing this is because I have not added the Firebase folders to my project. And that's simple enough to do. So we have our Google Services JSON. I added that to my Unity SDK folder just to make it a bit easier. You do need to unzip this folder first, but for the Google Services JSON, I'm just going to drag and drop that into my assets. And I'm not 100% sure where you are allowed to put this, but I do know that you are recommended to just put it in your parent assets folder with not putting it in subfolders. Okay, the next thing we want is we want to decide which of these packages do we want. If you have Firebase Analytics and you want to use it, then maybe you want to use that. But I will be using auth and database. So you can either do the window, package manager, I believe, import project, all of that stuff. But instead, what I will do with the project of Unity that I want as the last project that I clicked on, so if you have multiple Unity projects open, make sure the one that you want to add this package to is the last one opened. So I will double click Firebase auth, and it will try to open and import this Unity package into the last Unity project that I clicked on. And there we go. I am just going to add everything. I'm sure there are a few things that you can not add, like maybe the Firebase thing, because it's just pictures. But for safety reasons, just import everything that it has selected and don't deselect anything. Just because if something goes wrong, because you didn't add a necessary file, that's unnecessary troubleshooting for you. Okay, and it just takes a moment to import this, and we will want to add the next one. So this is auth. This is for our authentication, which in this video I will just be using the anonymous auth. However, if you watch my other videos, I do have more advanced forms of auth, such as the Google Play auth. And if you can understand anonymous auth, and then it's a very small step to go from anonymous to password and email. But yes, let's come back later. Alright, so the auth has been fully added. We see lots of extra folders. Just make sure that when you go to clean up your project, you're not deleting these folders. If you do want to do some changes to your app, then I recommend maybe just even creating a new project in the Unity Hub instead of trying to go through and delete these, because Firebase does not simply add to your assets, but they also add to your other packages and things like that. So it can be very hard to completely remove Firebase. Now, I do want the Firebase database. If you're using Firebase, then you instead want to use Firebase Firestore. Sorry, Firestore, not Firebase. And there are, other things. Functions, I believe, is a paid thing. Remote config, messaging, stuff like that. Did I click Firestore? I am terribly sorry. I wanted database. So it will take a moment for my project to take these, And because I clicked on the wrong thing, that's a very simple fix. Make sure you do not click import if you clicked on the wrong thing, which you see is the Firestore, so I will click cancel instead. Then I'm going to go back, make sure I click on the right thing, Firebase Database. Same thing, it's going to take a moment. Then I will click import and we will come back then. Alright, here we are, Firebase Database. This is the package I want. We see that all of the PNG files that I already have are deselected. Don't reselect them. You really don't even have to think here. Don't click anything unless you want to risk things not working, and just click import. So just import everything that it suggests for these two things, and we will come back when it is done importing everything and updating my script assemblies. Okay, so both of those have finished importing to my Unity project. Just to remind you, I used the Firebase Database and the Firebase Auth just because of how Firebase used to be. It used to be you wanted to import these in the order of importance, so Auth first, then Database. I don't know if that's important these days because I always do it nowadays. But okay, I've imported these. I'm just going to save my scene because I did add the Firebase controller without saving it. And let's go back to the scripts. And if I press Control period now, I do see the using Firebase Auth. Instead of Control period, you can also do quick actions in refactoring and do it there, or you can simply type using Firebase Auth by hand. Okay, so I'm just going to call this Firebase Auth off. I also want a Firebase user, which I will call user. If you want to know, hey, Nickton Gaming, hey, John from Nickton Gaming, how do you know all of this stuff? Well, it's because I read the documentation, so I strongly recommend you spend a day, a week, a month, however long it takes to go through those extremely tedious documentation pages, because then you can become, like me, knowing exactly what you want to type up. Okay. Then I want to make a start function. So private void start is part of the default Unity stuff, and I will say that my auth is going to be equal to my Firebase auth dot default instance. So this connects my authentication. I'm terribly sorry there. Default instance is not used as a method. Perfect. Okay. Then I will use a thing called auth.stateChanged. Pretty much this is a callback function, which means every time the state of your authentication is changed, it will rerun this, which is, in my eyes, a great way to handle your authentication. So I will say auth.stateChanged, and then because this is a kind of like delegate or event, I will say plus equals, and then I need to add a function. Now, to add a function to the state change, it's really not helpful, but what you need is you need to say object sender and then system dot event args, and I'm just going to call that event args. I do not use these, but you still are required to add them. Okay. And let's just look at this error. I'm pretty sure it would just be a shadow error, but let's look at it just in case. So, cannot convert the lambda expression to type event handler because they do not match the delegate parameter. types. Okay, that's my bad. We don't want a capital O on object. We want a lowercase o. There we go. So if you have an issue, before you ask questions, make sure you read through it all, do a quick Google search, and do some testing. Okay. Next, I want to say if my auth.current user is equal to null, or my auth.current user does not equal my user. So what this says, if the current user of my authentication is null, or my current user is not equal to my user. So what this pretty much means is if the user is deleted, this would run and say, hey, the user is null. And so even if my user exists, it will still run this. Now, if my current user is not equal to the user, so for example, if my user is Bob from accounting, but my current user is Ted from mechanics, then it will run this as well. So if the user changes, this will update your user. So next I want to say my user is equal to my auth.current user. So with Firebase, there are many times when it keeps you logged in even after you close the application, you reset your device, all that stuff. It may keep you logged in. Okay, next thing I want to say, if the user is still null, then I want to get my user. So let's go down here and say void get user, which we will fill in later. Back up here, and I'll say get user. Then I want to say else, and in this part you can say else. You know what? We'll do that. So I will say void handle database, or let's say handle database. That's what I like to call it. You can call it whatever you want. So else I will handle my database in another function. So that's all we want for the start. Let's go down into our get user. So in my get user, I am going to pretty much say that we want to log in or create a user. So typically in my get user, this is where I will do all of the crazy functions such as loading, creating or logging into a user if I have the preferences to, if I have the data saved in my preferences to log into a user. But if you remember, I am just using the anonymous login. So I'll say auth dot, let's do sign in anonymously async. And that's just going to sign in. When it does finish signing in, then the auth state will change and it's going to load this again, which is the great thing about this. And you can add some print statements here. So print, I will say logging in anonymously. There we go. Up here I can say print auth state changed, and here I can say print handling database. Okay, so in my handle database, this is the core of this video where we will actually start to get the database. So I'm going to say my database reference, there we go, which I will call database reference, is going to be equal to my Firebase database dot get instance, and now we want to go back to the Firebase to get that link. So here I am back in Firebase. I'll click the copy reference URL thing right here. Let's minimize that. I'm going to go in here, make sure I place my quotation marks. Make sure I place my quotation marks. And then I'm going to say dot root reference. So this is the top of this area. Okay. Then you can start to load data or anything that you want. What I want to say right now is I will just say my database reference dot value changed. This value changed is much like state changed. So anytime the data in my database is changed, it will load this. You can also do a thing like dot child, and we'll talk about children later. So if I say child automobile, so if the database with the name automobile has the value changed in it, then it will run this. And I do believe that it will at least run once. Okay, but we'll say that this is plus equal, and we need to start to receive the changes. Now to receive the changes, it's much like this one, where we want to say object sender, even if we don't use these, and then the value changed event args of event args. Now I of course never use these values. They're a higher tier than what you actually need for most game development, but you can still do them. So we do actually use the event args. So I will say that and actually for now let's just say print, and let's do a $sign to format. $sign next to the quotation marks means a formatted string, which you will see later. It's a nice little trick that I like to use. So I will say that my database value has changed, colon, curly brackets, and then I will simply log my data. So I will say my event args dot snapshot dot get raw JSON value. So what this will do is it will, every time my database changes, it's going to say my database value has changed, and then print all of the data in my database. Okay, let's do a few things. So we want to add our CRUD. So I'm going to do void create data, and I can even take something to create, but I think I will do string JSON data like this. And to create the data, what I can do is I can say that I want my, now you can save your database reference, but in the past I have had some issues with my database reference changing, oddly enough. So nowadays I like to get a new database reference each time I access my database. But that is not strictly needed. So you know what, let's just do it the more intuitive way, which is like this. And now I have a reference of my database. And so I'm going to say that my database reference dot set raw JSON value async is going to be equal to my JSON data. Now we can even override this, which we will be doing right now. So I'm going to say create data, and I will say string child, and then I will say dot child of the child. And we can play around with this more, because pretty much what this is going to do is this is going to override everything in your database with this data. This will delete and then create all of the data. This will delete and then create the data at this child. Okay, so that's create. The next thing we want is we want read. But hey, look, we already have read. This is our read. So then we want update. This would also be update, and this would also be delete. So if our string is empty, this would pretty much delete it. But I do believe we can do something like database reference dot. What about delete? Dot. There we go. So we can say remove value async. So if I want to, I can say void clear data, and then it's just going to say database reference dot remove value async. And we can even say clear data, add a string of child, and then database reference dot child with the name child, remove the value. And before we get too much farther, let's go down here and let's make another class. So we don't want void, we want class, and I'm going to name this class data. And oh, we don't want the method. There we go. So for the data can be anything you want, but we want to make it in the format so we can convert it to JSON data. So I'm going to make, so everything needs, all of our variables that you want saved must be public. So I will say public int index public string. Let's see, what if this data is for the emergency contact of someone? So public string employee name, public string and then let's say emergency contact. And we can even do multiple versions of these. So if I do class emergency contact, and then I say public string contact name, and then public string contact phone number. So then I have a public emergency contact, and you know what? Let's even make this an array so I can show you some arrays. I do believe that we want this to be system.serializable. Serializable means that you can go through it multiple times. If you want many data things, then you can make that serializable too. And we can continue adding things to this, but we don't need to. Now, the thing that JSON will always need is it will need an empty constructor. If you do not have any other constructors, then you don't need to add a constructor like with this. But we have lots of data, so I'm going to make another constructor with all of this. And you know what? I don't want to type the name and phone number in myself, so I'm going to generate those constructors as well. And to do this, I am typing Control period on an empty space, going to generate constructor. If you do not have these plugins added to your Visual Studios, then you might not have those. If you are curious to know how I set up my Visual Studios, please let me know in the comments below, and I can see about making a video for these. Beyond this, you can add your getters and setters, but that is beyond the scope of this. And so below my start, I'm actually going to make an update, and I'm going to go through a few of these. So I'm going to say if, because I don't want to make buttons, I'm going to say if input.getKeyDown is equal to the key code Q. Then I will say print create data at child. So let's make a few serialized field, string, child. And for now I'm going to say that this child is equal to data 0. It can be any string that you want it to be. And then let's do another serialized field, and let's try making a serialized field of our data. And just to make sure that this is working as we expect it to, I'm going to go back to my Unity project. I will wait for things to update. Things should be updating. I've saved everything. Yes. I've gone back. And it looks like we have an issue. Okay. So in your script, if you ever have an issue, it will not update until you go through it. So now we will come back after my script assemblies have reloaded. Okay, so my script assemblies have reloaded. We see the child, we see my data. This is perfect. If you want to have multiple things of data, you can even go into your script and make a data array by saying data array and then saving it. But I'm going to keep it simple. We already have another array in here, so I don't need to do too many things. Just know that you don't want to use lists unless you do the list.toArray. Okay, anyways, in our update, we say create child, and then we actually want to create the child. So let's say create data, and then let's say child, and then we want to use a thing called JSON utility. JSON utility will convert our data to a JSON string. And to see this, let's actually go here above our print statement. I'm going to say string data equals JSON utility dot to JSON. And to JSON, I will say that this will take my data object. Okay. I need to say this dot data. So data is inside of this update function. If you want to use something of this class, then you say this. Okay. And then I say data, and let's go back to this print string, add a $sign, so then we can also log the data that we are printing as well. Let's go here, copy and paste this Q, let's say W. then we will create data at root, and this will create data at the root. We also want to clear the data. So I'm just going to copy this first bit, add another ending curly bracket. Instead of W, let's do E. And I will say print clear data at child. And then I will say clear data and pass in child. And that's not what we want. We don't want the whatever that is. We want the semicolon. Okay, one more thing that we have, which is R, and we want to say clear, not data at child, but clear all data. There we go. And all along the way, we should see this. We should see our, where is it? It's going to be in our handle database. Yes, we should see this printing our database value changed for us. Now, what you can do is say I have another serialized field, but this one is called my loaded data. I can set my, and let's just set that as, yeah, that's fine as it is. So when my database is loaded, I will say my loaded, actually you might want to put this into a try catch. So first let's do string data equals data. There we go. So my data will be equal to the raw JSON value. And then I will say, yeah, we still need to try and catch, because normally you will do this with the child in mind, such as the user ID or something like that, or the room ID. But because I am doing this in a more free manner, I will add this to a try and catch. So if I cannot do this, I will just throw an error, or I will catch the error and then do nothing. But otherwise, let's try this. So let's say this dot data equals JSON utility. So this is how you, we don't want this dot data, we want our loaded data. That's it. Equals loaded equals JSON utility dot from JSON. Now you do need to specify the type. So this will be of the type data, and the stuff it will try to convert is this. Okay. So now everything should be working. I hope that this has been good for you. I'm going to go back to my Unity as soon as the script assemblies reload, and we will test things out one last time. Let me increase the size of my console. We see my data, we see my loaded data. Okay, I'm going to press play. We'll see a few things here. We can also see some changes in our Firebase. And if we get issues like this, that's perfectly fine. We just need to look through them and solve them. Okay, so for this issue, it's a fairly common issue. It happens sometimes, it doesn't happen sometimes. I've not had it for quite a while, but the solution, for me at least, would be to create a new folder called Streaming Assets, and then just drag your Google services in there. Other things to check, you want to also make sure that it says Google Services and not Google Services 1, Google Services 2. You also want to make sure that it is Google Services .json, I believe. So if you right click and go to show in Explorer, it should be Google Services JSON, not Google Services JSON.txt. So make sure all of those things are correct. If you have the issue and my solutions did not help you, make sure you Google it after spending, 15 to 30 minutes trying to solve your issue and you still have not been able to do it. Please make a comment in the YouTube video, and both myself and other members watching the video will do their best to help you, hopefully. But okay, so once it's in streaming assets, we will see these errors cleared away when I click play. So let's do this final test. We also want to remember our keys that we have, and you know what, I might even go, so we say the auth state has changed. I'm handling my database because when I was testing this it did log in. My database value has changed and there's nothing there. Okay, now if I go in here, I say index 0, employee name Carl with a K, employee contacts, this guy will have 2 contacts. Contact name will be Tiffany with the phone number of 012345678 and then we have Henry with an IE. I don't know why I'm giving all of these people weird names, and 987654310. Okay, now if I click on game and I press Q, we see that I create data at child. The data I am creating will have an index 0, an employee named Carl, and then this array of employee contacts. And we see that my value has changed as well. Okay, and let's go and look in our database and we can see it there as well. Okay, so now I've got both screens open and we see in my database I now have data 0. Which isn't that amazing. So it has the emergency contacts of Tiffany and Henry, employee name of Carl, index of 0. If I change this index, it actually changes right away because we are doing that on value change. And we see that it has actually updated where I have my index to 1. If I correct the name Carl to Carl with a C like it should be, we see that it updates again with the correct name. Now if I do something like pressing W, that deletes the previous one and adds it here. So we have Q, which creates it at the child. And if you notice, I can create many different childs this way. So if I say data 1 Q, I now have data 1. If I have data 2 Q, I now have data 2. But be careful, because if I name this error and I remove the emergency contacts and I set it back to data 0, and I press Q, what do you think would happen to my data 0? Yes, it deletes the data 0 and it replaces it with the relevant information. If I press E, it will clear things at data 0. If I change data 0 to data 2, and I press E, it clears, it deletes data 0. If I press R, it of course deletes everything. And very similarly, if I have data 2, data 0, and then I press W, it deletes all of the children that I have. So be careful with where you are writing your data to. I really hope that this has helped you out. We've gone almost an hour, so I hope it wasn't too long. I will be adding all of this to my GitHub. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, I implore you to please reach out to me And there we go. We do see that my loaded data is being filled up there. We forgot to talk about that. So let me say Art. I actually knew a guy named Art when I was a child. And then Bart. Sure. And then I press W. It updates this. And we see that this updates as well in the loaded data. So there you go. Even that's tested. So thank you for watching. Have an amazing day.